Hi, my name is Jason Sulliman, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how I practice. I've given a presentation recently on a 1,000-day challenge that I imposed on myself. And I've learned a great deal, not only through that, but the years that I've put into researching best practice methods. And I've kind of come up with, I think, some pretty significant breakthroughs that I think might be able to help other people. So I put this together. Hopefully it helps you. So in today's presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts, the challenges and the benefits of practicing every single day, which is what I did for 1,000 days. I'm actually up to day 1,223, I think it is now. And my takeaways, what I've learned from this experience, and how, for me, I don't think I'm ever going to go back. I actually changed it to a 2,000-day practice challenge because it's been so beneficial and transformative to the way that I improve on the instrument. But full disclosure, I've always been that person. When I was young, 5th grade, I started playing trombone in school band. And even then I loved to play. I would play through the entire, Yamaha beginner method book that we had. And I would constantly be trying to find other things to play. I was a little, a sponge, and I really enjoyed it. And that held with me throughout my life and career. Doesn't matter where I've been. I've always tried to carve out time to find, practice time. The couple of pictures up here, there's a New Year's party at my house. I'm the guy with the trombone in the back because of course I'm going to play because I like to play the trombone. I was on a tour with a show, and we were at a rest area. It was raining, so I couldn't just go find a picnic table. So instead I used one of the luggage bays on the bus. These are examples of the ways that I have always sought out opportunities to continue to just get a little bit of practice time. So admittedly, I'm coming at it from that vantage, and that's not everybody, and I completely appreciate that. So just, take that for what it's worth. So the way that I look at it is that if I imagine being, let's say, a bass trombonist in the industry of music, I think about it almost as if I'm trying to climb Mount Bass Trombone. The way that we can kind of talk about it logarithmically, everybody who's ever held a trombone, probably, 1 million people kind of makes up the base, right? And then out of those 1 million people, who are the best 10% of the players in that population? Well, then you get to probably the top 100,000. And now you're talking about students at the high school level that have, put in some time, maybe the all-state band members, things like that. Out of that group, if we think about who are the top 10% of those players, we're probably talking students that are at the collegiate level, graduate students, some freelancers that are out there, you're starting to get paid to play the trombone. And we can talk specifically bass trombone or just trombone in general, or you can apply this to any instrument you like. But you're starting to get paid to play the instrument, whether it's church gigs or, various, maybe regional orchestras, maybe you're subbing at places, maybe, you're playing in some of those orchestras. But the top 10% of those players, in terms of that level, are going to probably make up about the top 1,000 players. And now we're talking about people that play professionally in those orchestras, all over the country, or the world. And if we think about the 10% of that level, now we're talking about the top level players that are, in the orchestras and the bands, freelance players, studio players, and chances are them by name. If you're interested in the trombone, for example, you would know those trombonists by name, or most of them by name for sure. But if we think about all those people in a room, and then we think, okay, well, who are the best 10% of that room? Now we're talking about really the creme de la creme. We're talking about the most well-known and the most accomplished people that generally are playing in the most prestigious ensembles or teaching at the most prestigious universities. Several CD recordings that have kind of laid out maybe some definitive versions, at this point of the solo repertoire that's out there for the instrument. It's a little arguable who specifically would be, in that top 10 tier, but we can imagine that one exists, right? And out of that, it becomes even more arguable who would be the one that's kind of the top of the industry. But to use this analogy, we kind of refer to it in this logarithmic idea. And so when I think about my journey, I think about wanting to climb Mount Bass Trombone. Like, I want to get there. I want to get to be that great on the instrument. And I think that it's possible for me to do that. And so I'm going to keep working. And it turns out I have some challenges that maybe not everybody has, but I think a lot of people have unique challenges. So I don't think I am, alone in that part of the journey. But rather than thinking about it like a mountain, like it's higher and lower, I like to think about it more like it's, and if you notice this picture of the train tracks, it kind of looks the same, shape. But it's more about linear and being further in a journey, like who's taking it further and who's going further. So I like this idea of having it lay out kind of laterally in front of me. But the next thing is that we're not really on tracks. It's not like we all go the same exact track. There's many different ways to kind of take this journey. So I think more of it like this kind of landscape, if you will, where there are these peaks and valleys and you can go all sorts of different ways to get there. But that's the way that I kind of imagine the journey of, climbing Mount Bass Trombone. So with every vantage point that I've reached and every a plateau or a moment, a crest, if you will, I've made the decision that I want to get to the next one. And that's not something that everybody does, but I'm coming at this from the vantage point of every time that I've reached that new level, I've said, oh, wow, this is really great. I want to get to that level now. It's kind of become an obsessive little passion of mine. So I hit a plateau that was pretty significant in my playing. I was about 38 years old, and I realized that the way that I was practicing, I was fine. I had a doctorate from a good university. I had a full-time, professor position at a university. I was playing in regional orchestras and, doing a lot of sub and freelance work. And, many people would be very, complacent at that point. But I just realized that if I wanted to be a serious contender at auditions, especially if the jobs start getting bigger and more competitive, I was going to have to completely change the way that I played and therefore completely change the way that I practice. And so that kind of started me on this journey. I said, you know what, I need to play every single day and I need to see what comes of it, because that's something I hadn't done. In undergraduate, I usually practiced 6 days a week, and I gave myself a rest day that held through most of my graduate school time and after that. And then, to be honest, when life starts hitting you, significantly with responsibilities, obligations, and other things, you have a kid, and when you have a job, and when you're doing all these other things, there are days that you don't get to practice, or at least I thought. And so I said, well, I wonder what would happen if I got rid of those. And I literally practiced every day. So my 1,000-day challenge is practicing every day, no days off. What's going to happen? So a thought about how much time we should spend practicing, because I think it is important to kind of address this a little bit. I think it all depends on how good you want to be. If your goal is to not fail your band class, then that's a different amount of practicing. If you want to be the top player in your band, if you want to be a section leader, if you want to make all state, if you want to go to college, if you want to be a professional, there are so many different levels to this that really is going to depend upon what your goals are. And you don't need to have all of your goals laid out for now. You just maybe need to have some immediate goals for maybe this year, what you want to do this year, and then see where that kind of takes you. I really hate using the word enough. Are you practicing enough? Are you working enough at something? I just think it can be a limiting word in some ways. And so I try to remove it from my teaching and my own thought about how I practice. But a little bit of science. Anders Ericsson out of Florida State, no longer with us, but gave us a lot of information and a lot of perspective from a scientific standpoint on qualitative, the concept of deliberate practice. And the research basically says you have about 4 hours a day of just high level brain power. You can pretty much use that however you want, but everybody's going to start getting diminishing returns in terms of that high level, brain power kind of practicing. So that 10,000 hour rule kind of came as a derivative of that. It takes about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to master something. I think it's important to note here, though, that if you're climbing Mount Bass Trombone or whatever mountain you're trying to, climb, 10,000 hours doesn't magically put you at the top. 10,000 hours puts you at a place where you're one of a small number of people who have gotten that far in the instrument. But if there are 100 people who have put in 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, then you're one of 100 people or 1,000 people or whatever. And so those people that are kind of at the top of whatever industry you're looking at, they're well beyond 10,000 hours. In many cases, they're more like 15, maybe even 20,000 hours. And frankly, I don't even like counting the hours. I would rather call it breakthroughs. Every time I have a breakthrough on the instrument, I think that's one little nugget of kind of improvement. And I think 1,000 breakthroughs for me is just an easier way to kind of wrap my brain around the idea. But 10,000 hours is a common phrase that's used out there in the world, so we'll go with it for here. I think that the concept of endurance, it really should be thought about in terms of efficiency. It's not so, if you're practicing 4 hours a day and you try to get 5 hours a day, well, yeah, you might get a little better, but I think it would be more valuable for you to take that 4 hours and say, okay, how can I be more efficient with this 4 hours? And I think that if you're practicing efficiently, you shouldn't be really destroying your chops. If you if you play high notes for like 3 hours a day and you do high loud playing, really demanding playing for like 3 hours a day, I don't think that's the most efficient way to practice. So I think that if you're doing it correctly and you're getting the work that you need to get, but you're getting everything that you need to get, I think you can do it in a way to where you're not destroying your face. So again, for me, I looked at it in this kind of way of just trying to climb Mount Bass trombone. Frankly, if I were to level with y'all, I would say that right now I'm probably in that 1,000 region of bass trombone somewhere where, you know, I have a job, I play in a small orchestra, I get paid to play the instrument, but, you know, there are 1,000 bass trombonists that can do what I do. And some of them are even like high school and undergraduate students that just have really great facility. And I'm totally aware that that's where I am right now. So I'm still trying to work my way up. So what level should I attain on something when I'm practicing? You know, we've heard a lot of different ways that people refer to this. It's common to say, don't practice something until you get it right, practice it until you can't get it wrong. And that sounds really romantic and flowery. And I think in some ways it's very true, but I don't think that can apply to everything we do all the time, because you would run out of time trying to get to everything you want to get to, right? Some people say practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect permanent. And again, I'm going to throw some issue at this and throw it a little shade. Yes, but when people say practice makes perfect, I think that that is incorrect. And when people say practice makes permanent, I think that's closer, but I still think that it is incorrect. And I think perfect practice makes perfect permanent is completely false. I think that it is entirely reasonable to have some of our practice time be ugly and gross and still be yielding the kinds of breakthroughs that we need to get better at playing the instrument. So this concept that we need to play everything perfectly as we're practicing it, I think we're mixing two different pots. And so I'll get into that in a little bit. Lately, there's been some things, some memes making it around on Instagram, the whole lining up 10 pennies on a stand. And when you play it right, you move a penny over. When you play it right again, you move a penny over. Again, I think this can be really beneficial, but I think it can also have some issues. For example, if you're playing in a way that isn't as efficient and effective in terms of how your face is just working to produce sound, you could probably do it 10 times in a row and you could probably get it to sound good 10 times in a row. But if you're doing it in a way that is less efficient, you're just you're further establishing a habit of less efficient practice. So I think that it can work for certain people at certain times on certain things in the journey, but you have to be very careful about when you apply that. And I don't think just doing that is going to necessarily get you to the next level. I think it's going to get you really, really good at whatever level you're at. So for some that may be great, and for some that may be a problem. Some people say record it, and would you post it publicly? You know, and if you record it and it sounds good and you would post it publicly, okay, well then that means that you have achieved some level of success. And I think, you know, success can be kind of talked about in a couple of ways. So here's how I look at success. I think there's 4 categories of success. I think the bottom level of success is where you're surviving something. You've reached a level of survival, and I think that you kind of, it is something that you've reached, right? We've all played gigs where we're surviving. You know, we've all played repertoire where we are surviving. I think it's funny how in university study, a lot of us have to do a piano proficiency. You'll notice proficiency is 3rd on my list, but really I think most of us are just trying to get through piano survival. And I think it's more of a piano survival. I think it's misnamed in terms of the way that the universities look at it, but survival, basic level of success. You're basically doing it, right? I think if you continue to get a little bit better at something, you'll reach a level of competence, and that's where you can play something and you can play it well. Okay, great, right? That doesn't mean you always do, but you have done it, right? And I think if you keep practicing and keep developing a greater level of quality and consistently, you'll reach a level of proficiency, and that's where you do play it well. You play it at a certain point or a certain level. And I think if you were to continue up the journey on whatever you're doing, mastery is basically like proficiency, but the difference is it's very easy for you to do. You don't have to expend a ton of physical and mental and emotional effort, and in order to make that mastery version happen, it becomes the habit, right? I do play it well easily. And so I think that, you know, with any level that we're talking about, you can kind of have a survival level, a competence level, a proficiency level, a mastery level, and you can master a basic level of playing, and then you start surviving the next level up, and you kind of work your way up. So these 4 levels kind of happen at all sorts of different points on the journey. So if we think about these 4 levels of success, we can think about like the mastery being the red dot kind of in the middle. And then that's like the things that we do really, really well. A level of proficiency, you know, we do those kind of well. A level of competence is the green, we do those okay. And a level of survival. Everything outside of the blue is stuff that we're not yet even surviving. Things that we can't really play yet. And so we're working on trying to get those kind of into the blue circle. So there's a couple ways to look at it. One way to look at it is you're trying to get everything into the blue circle, get everything into the green circle, get everything into the yellow circle, get everything into the red circle. We want everything in the red circle. But some people may visualize it in a slightly different way. They may say, well, actually, what I'm trying to do is expand my circles. I want my blue circle to get huge. I want my red circle to get huge. And everything's going to slowly kind of get inside that mastery level comfort zone. And frankly, I would rather have it be a sphere, but I'm not savvy enough with PowerPoint's shapes. So here we have 2-dimensionals. That's what we're working with. So here's another point that I think is really, really worth talking about. What does it mean to practice? And this is something that people talk about. I think that people use the word practice as a verb for a lot of things that I don't consider practicing. So here are some categories. I think practicing is where you're doing deliberate work on getting better at playing the instrument. It's highly planned, it's highly focused, you have specific goals. Usually those goals center around the things that you do the worst, your weaknesses, right? That's practicing. If you're learning a piece of music for, you know, a recital or an audition or whatever, I think you are preparing. I think that is generally in the category of preparing. That's where you're learning the notes, the interpretation, how you're going to play it. Now, it is possible to use a piece of repertoire, whether it's an orchestral excerpt or a solo or whatever, an etude, to use that to be working on technical aspects of just how you play the instrument, in which case you're using the repertoire to practice. But what I would argue is that there is probably a more efficient way to do it that doesn't involve getting a bunch of reps on the repertoire and kind of habiting a certain way to play the repertoire. I think etudes are fine, but if you're using orchestral excerpts to get better at the instrument, I think what you're also doing is you're creating kind of a habit of playing that excerpt at almost a mediocre level or an okay level as opposed to a mastery level. And that can cause problems with efficiency and effectiveness down the line. So we have to be very careful about the repertoire that we choose to use to get better at playing the instrument. I think a lot of people spend time maintaining. Maintaining is basically just where you have some kind of ritualistic warm up or things that you go through to get back to a certain level of play. And some people might do this on a daily basis or a weekly basis or monthly basis. If you take a lot of time off from the instrument and you kind of, you know, you haven't played much over the past 3-4 days, let's say you've had 3 days where you didn't play at all. And then this weekend you've got a gig and you know you have to prepare for that. So you kind of pull out your, you know, your long tones and your scales and your arbin and whatever, and you work through those things. But you're not really getting better at playing the instrument. You're not reaching a new level of playing the instrument. Most of that time is just getting you back up to a level that you already know you're capable of doing. You just can't do right now physically. And so that is something that I think a lot of amateur players spend a lot of time doing, a lot of community players and student players. They spend more of their time going through some kind of maintenance or just getting back up to a previously achieved level. I try to avoid this like the plague by practicing and improving every single day. I would rather have my time be practice time where I'm improving. Performing, that's another category. And I like to say top left to bottom right, just because that's the way that we will read a piece of music. Like we're not stopping, we're playing it. And you may be performing for yourself in a practice room, going through some kind of dress rehearsal in your own mind. You may be going through a mock audition for yourself. I still think that is a version of performance. I think performance is crucial for development. I just don't think it's the same as practicing. We do get better from performance. We need performance. I don't think the gains we make there are the same gains we make in our practicing. Performing would be an entirely different presentation. I'm talking about practice today, so that's the difference. And then playing. Playing is where you just pick up the horn and you just play stuff, and it's just enjoyment. You're not focused necessarily on getting better. Some people might refer to it as like a musical self-actualization. The ultimate goal is to just reach that level where you're just playing. And I think, let's face it, whether you're taking an audition or you're doing a recital, I mean, the ultimate goal is to get to a level on the instrument where it is just playing, where you are literally just sharing joy through your instrument. You're not practicing, you know, you're not, it's bliss. I'm not there yet. When I perform, I have moments that I feel that, but they are fleeting and random. And it's just not, I'm not at a level where I feel that just all the time, where I can just start an audition or a performance and stay kind of in that zone of flow. I would love to get there, and I'm working toward it. And I think the more that we practice and the more mastery we have, the more our performances can just be playing. So here's the way that I look at it. Work hard times work smart equals productivity. The level of quality in your practice versus the amount of time that you're doing, the quantity that you're doing, is going to determine the productivity that you have. Simple formula, right? Okay, so common practice recommendations, depending upon what level you're at, what age you are, 30 minutes a day. That's common for like high school students, maybe hour a day for maybe more dedicated high school students. 2 hours a day for really dedicated high school students. When you get to the college level, 3 hours a day becomes maybe the buzz phrase. And I look at it completely differently. I use a term called units, and we'll talk about units now. So I use a practice chart. The one on the left is just a PDF, and actually you can download it on my website if you want, but frankly, it's a little bit low tech. On the right is in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet where actually a student of mine created this and started using it, and I love the idea so much. So Joseph Romo, thanks for doing this, buddy. I'm still using it every day. I basically just have these little blocks, and each of these little blocks refers to a unit of time. So I want to talk briefly about the concept of flat rate. My brother Derek is a wonderful mechanic. He's actually a technology specialist. I believe that's his title at Lexus in Connecticut. And he introduced me to a concept called flat rate. And flat rate is just where in the mechanic world, when you bring your car in for service, there is a flat rate that you will get charged in terms of the labor for whatever you're getting done. If you're getting an oil change, you're going to pay for 15 minutes of labor, regardless of the amount of time that it takes for the technician to do that oil change. If they run into delays, there's a part that's broken or whatever, like the filter's not in stock, they wait for a parts delivery person to bring it there, you don't pay more because it took longer. You just pay the 15 minutes of labor. If that shop charges $60 an hour for labor, you're paying 15 bucks in labor costs for that oil change, and then you'll pay for the parts and all that stuff. Transmission costs 6 hours of labor. To rebuild a frame, it's like 48 hours of labor, but these are pre-described amounts of time that it should take to do something in the industry, right? And I kind of use this concept in my practicing. So each block is about 15 minutes of practice. But the truth is, what I've done is I've developed kind of these exercises and these little menus of things to do that I recognize take me about 15 minutes to do. Now, some days, if I'm getting down a little rabbit hole, or if something's like a little sluggish in my face, or it takes a little longer, then it might take 17, 18 minutes. And then some days I might just blaze right through it. Everything's lined up, things are great, and it takes me like 13 and a half minutes. I still just count it as a unit of practice. Now, in this 1,000-day practice challenge that I've done, my goal was to get at least 1 unit a day. And the number of times where I had only 1 unit is actually pretty small. It's under 20 days, I think it was, under 20 days where I had just 1 unit of practice. And it was usually like a massive travel day with gigs and teaching obligations, performances in the evening. Maybe I had to drive 2-3 hours to get somewhere, or there were some days where I was sick and I really wasn't feeling well physically, but I still tried to get 1 unit of practice just to get some time on the instrument and make something better. Those are basically when those came up. So the challenges of doing 1,000 days or practicing every single day is that it is time consuming, and your time is finite. It's a finite resource that you have. And so to spend time every day, that means that you're doing something that most people, in the world they don't have to do. It's that one extra thing you got to do. And so you have to accommodate time for that. It's a lot of reasons, to say, I don't have time to practice today. And that's fine. That's going to be based on your level of motivation. If you're sick, obviously, if you're injured, you don't want to, create further injury. And so you're going to have that kind of answers it for you. You're probably going to have to take time off. But these tend to be the things that keep people from practicing. And I'm not judging anybody who practices or doesn't practice, but these are just the things that seem to come up most frequently. So as a bass trombonist, I also run into the problem of facilities, especially if I'm traveling. So if I'm going anywhere for gigs or, seeing the family or whatever, it's tough to find places to practice. But you know what? If you really want to do it, you can get pretty creative. So here are just some examples of things that I've done. Upper left, that was, I was going through Texas and I ended up going through Denton. And I went over to UNT and I used one of the practice rooms. And actually that was a classroom that was open and nobody was around. And so I practiced. You can do that. There are schools everywhere, and a lot of them are pretty open-minded in terms of their practice facility usage. If you do a little research, if you know some people that are there, you can maybe find ways to do that when you're traveling. You'll notice the upper right pictures; those are just rest areas. pulled over at a rest area. And at the time, actually, I had an infant son. So we would do it when he was sleeping in the car, like when he passed out, like usually after lunch, he's taking a nap. All right, well, now we're coming up to rest area. I'll pull over and try to get to, 1 or 2 units of practice. And I did that a number of times. The center one on the bottom here, that's just an Airbnb. Frankly, at this point in my life, if I'm traveling, I'm probably staying in an Airbnb if I can't find another way to practice, because I can get a house. And when you get a house that's a standalone house, it costs more, but you can practice. So, for me, that's worth it. That extra cost is worth it. Bottom right, that was in Nebraska. Next to it was like a kid fun park zone, one of those indoor playland kind of things. So my partner took our son over to that. And this building was being constructed, but it was the weekend, so there were no construction crews present. So I just set up all my gear and made a practice space. And I was there for like 2 hours, just getting, I think I got like 6, 7 units. So, you can get creative with it. And depending upon how bad you want it, you can find a way. Again, for me, I'm trying to get to the top of Mount Bass trombone. So for me, it was absolutely worth it. All right, so here are some things that I noticed in my trends. So each one of these bars in this bar graph represents 100 days of practice. And then in the left column, you'll see numbers 1,000, 900, 800, 700, 600, et cetera. That refers to the number of units that I got in the 100 days. So it's really easy to do the math. You'll notice in the first 100 days, I got slightly under 400 units of practice, which means I practiced less than 4 units a day. So you might think that that's less than an hour a day. Technically it is, although I think when somebody goes into a practice room from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., they're not getting 8 units of practice. I think that I have spent 2 hours of their life, and they're probably getting something more like 5 units of practice, because the amount of downtime and the amount of inefficiency that happens with that 2 hours. However, I got slightly under 4 units of practice a day, and I was shocked. I thought for sure I practiced more than that, but when I saw it on paper, no, that's how much I practiced. Now, the next couple of 100 days, I stayed at about that level because I was dealing with some embouchure resetting types of things that I wanted to kind of go after. That I definitely have some embouchure things that I'm dealing with, and that's one of those big limiting factors in terms of the way that I play the instrument that I need to work through to get to that next level. So I took a couple of 100 days and just played 1 or 2 units, so that a vast majority of the time I was spending on the instrument was to recalibrate the way that my face played. And I think that that's really important if that's something that you need to do it every day, and to minimize the amount of playing that you're doing that isn't focused on that. So you are not falling back into old habits and enforcing those old habits. If you want to change a habit quickly, you got to go all in on it. Now, once I felt like I started to make some breakthroughs, I was in somewhere in the 300s. So it's been about a year of practicing every single day. And now I feel like I can start adding some more time on the instrument. By the 400s, I was off to the races. 900 units, I got literally 900 units during the 400s and 900 units during the 500s. I was religiously getting 9 units a day, and I was getting a ton of great work done. Now, after that, there were some busy days in the 600s, so it dropped down a little bit. And then you'll notice in the 700s, it drops down to about 550. And then I stayed there for about 300 days. I'm going to come back to that, but there was a deliberate reason why I made a choice to do that. And then since then, I've been rocking the somewhere between, for the most part, 500, 600 days. Obviously, I was a little busier in the thousands, so the numbers are a little lower. So the benefits to practicing every day, this is what I noticed, and tracking your progress. I think if you're practicing and you're not paying attention to what you're doing or reflecting on what you did and using that to inform your decisions to what you're going to do next, you're not getting everything you can out of it, right? So for me, there's just a huge increase in the awareness of how much I practice and what I need to practice. And so I think my productivity went through the roof. It was transformative over those 1,000 days, to the point where now I'm doing a 2,000-day practice challenge. I'm just continuing and I'm not stopping because it's been so transformative to my playing. I do also think that there's a psychological advantage to practicing every day and getting better every day. Knowing that when there's a problem in your playing or something that emerges as the thing you need to go after, knowing that you're hitting it every day and you're making tiny improvements every day and you're reflecting on what you did and you're coming up with creative answers to try to go after it, it's only a matter of time before you're going to get through it and you're going to get beyond it. You're going to get up to that next level of play. And I think that there's a real bolstering of confidence that comes from the work that you're doing, and that feeds into motivation and self-efficacy. So I think that, if you can look at a situation and say, oh yeah, I'll get that. Yeah, that's probably going to take 200 days. I'll sort that out. That's great. Because there was a point in my 30s where I was like, am I ever going to get through this? Am I ever going to be able to find a way to do it? Or or are those people more talented than me? I think that's bogus. I think you can get through it. And I think, hitting it every day helps. I also find that the best I can do is the best I can do is a phrase that kind of reminds me of what my undergraduate teacher used to say. I went to the University of Massachusetts for my undergraduate. David Sporny was my trombone professor there, and he was like a father to me. He was a wonderful mentor, and he was exactly what I needed at that time in my life and development. And I'm so thankful for having gotten some time, under his tutelage. He used to say, the only reason to be nervous is if you're not prepared. And that never sat well with me, but I think it's because deep down I knew I wasn't as prepared as I could be, because I wasn't being as efficient as I could be in my practicing. And now I feel like I've really gained a lot of ground on my efficiency in terms of how I practice and how productively I practice. I'm actually making strides in the things that I need to be making the strides on the most. And so I'm at the point now where I feel like I'm doing the best I can do. And it has completely changed the way that I approach auditions and performances. I don't really get that nervous anymore. I get excited for performances or auditions, like I want to go play because I'm prepared. But there's this feeling of just comfort, knowing that I've done everything I can do. So it's either going to work out and go the way I want it to go, and in which case, great, validates the work I've done, or it's not. And that just means that it wasn't going to happen right now. I need more time to develop whatever, because I've done everything I can do. And when you've done everything you can do, the best you can do is the best you can do. So there's no sense in worrying about whether or not it's enough, because even if it's not enough, you couldn't have done more. And so it's been a really, really nice game changer for my emotional state of this journey. And so, yeah, I highly recommend finding a way to get to that state. It's important to remember not all units are equal. The units that I'm pulling now, like I'm in the 1230s, 1230 days in a row. The units that I'm pulling now, I am in a much more experienced place, a much more productive place. And I think that they are more productive than they were when I first started. And I think that that kind of builds and builds and builds on itself. When you get 6, 7, 10, 20, 30 days in a row, you get more and more effective at using that unit. And so I think that if I get a unit of about 15 minutes, I'm getting a lot more done than perhaps some of my students or, maybe some younger players. And so I think it's important to remember that, though we're talking about units as if it's some kind of comparable thing across people, it's not even comparable across me. I think that the units that I'm getting after the 1,000 days are just more weighty than the units I was getting at the beginning. Just important to keep in mind as we have this talk. As a teacher, I think when you have more experience with more of those vantage points on the mountain, when you've reached more of those levels, I think that you have more that you can offer to other students. But I also think that the best, if you're in that 100,000 level, sometimes the best teachers are the people that are at that 10,000 level and have just arrived at that 10,000 level, because they have a very clear idea of what it took to get from that 100,000 level to that 10,000 level. If you're at that 10 level, it might be really hard for you to relate to that 100,000 level because it's so far removed in your rearview mirror. You don't really even remember what it's like to play like that, or what it's like to struggle on the basic fundamental concepts of playing the instrument like those people do. Yeah, you can be a great coach. You can be inspirational. You can provide audio examples in your playing, and you can do a lot of effective things. But in some ways, there are aspects of teaching and communication and reaching people that I think the proximity to the level you're at versus the level that they are at really does make a difference. And this shows up in terms of research with peer versus expert modeling and teaching. And so I think it's important to remember that as you're climbing this mountain, it might change the level that you're most, appropriate to be teaching. There was a point where I was teaching almost exclusively beginners when I was ABD. I was doing a lot of freelancing and teaching a lot of lessons. There's going to be a point like 5 years from now where I don't know if I would be the best person to teach that level of student. There might be people that are just much closer to where those students are in terms of their development. And for me, it might be too far removed. I don't know. I'll let you know in 5 years. I think mastery practice is what I'm after, not mastery performance. And I think it's all about the practice, because if you're getting it in the practice, it will show up in your playing and in your performance and all that, and all those other areas. So here's just a sliver. You'll notice this kind of early on, and you can see this is day 8 over here, first column. Day 8, that was my practice log. I wrote down some information. I spent 5 minutes on, some long tones, and I spent like 9 minutes on glisses. Again, I was working on some of those embouchure type things. But not a ton of information, not a ton of depth, right? Not a ton of specificity. And then the next one over, it was day 401. And you can see that I'm starting to get a little bit more specific, and a little bit more deliberate with what I'm working on, right? And I'll probably call that a competent level of practice. Next column over was like day 500, and I think it's even jumped up a little bit there. I think I've reached a level of proficiency in my practice in terms of my effectiveness in the practice room. And then the last one was day 1209. It was a couple weeks ago, and highly specific, you know, a lot of different tempos, a lot of different ratios, a lot of different cycling through of various exercises and doing it in a very specific way. I think if you're a mastery level practicer, that's what you're doing. You're being very specific and very, very focused in how you're kind of going after it. So one of the things I think that has also been of benefit is that the shedding of the ego. And I don't mean ego in terms of superiority complex. I mean ego in terms of viewing the world kind of from the vantage point of the self, right? Getting into a little bit of the Zen thought of it. But if we can reach a level of self-actualized practicing, and we can shed all this baggage about what other people think about our practicing or why we're practicing, you know, sometimes our motivations are a little weird, you know, a little maybe not as wholesome as we think they are. You know, if you want to be better than that person, or you don't want those people to think that you're that bad, you know, whatever. We can run down all sorts of psychological rabbit holes. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when I reached day 1000, and it wasn't exactly on day 1000, but now that I'm, you know, kind of on the other side of that, I feel like I've reached more of this self-actualized place where I practice just to get better. That's it. I don't care if other people practice or don't practice. I don't care if they judge me for my practice, if they think I'm obsessive or whatever. I don't care. I practice because I want to get better. And at this point, I don't practice to keep the streak alive or anything like that either. It's just every day I wake up and I want to get better at the instrument. And I've got a lot of ideas on how to do that. So I do that. So it just so happens that I'm practicing every day. It's a completely different place from where I started. And I think it's a very healthy place. And so some people may reach that in 500 days. Some people may reach that in 3,000 days. I don't know. But I think that reaching it was significant, you know, for my development. So I want to go back to that point earlier in the chart where I was talking about how in the bar graph where I was getting about 900 units a day, and then all of a sudden it kind of drops down. So this is actually the day that happened. So this was in 2019, and I was, you know, you can see I was getting like 10 units a day. I was really cranking them out and just getting a lot of work done. And I checked in with my family. There was one day where I basically just said, hey, you know, how are things going? You know, how is my practicing affecting our family? And it was hard, you know, like it's not easy when you have other people that rely on you and you have other obligations that are important to you. And basically we decided that I was just gone too much. And so rather than kind of taking a visceral response to this, I said, okay, is there a way that I can get everything done that I'm getting done, but in less units? And so I started saying, well, okay, if I cut down this little like buzzing thing I do, you know, I do like 3 minutes and I do it on 10 different things. Well, what if I do it on 2 minutes for those 10 different things? I just cut 10 minutes out of practice time. Am I still getting done what I need to get done? Well, let's try it and see what happens. Or, you know, if I'm doing this intervals pattern, but it's kind of like arpeggios, but then maybe the next day I'm doing like chord progression arpeggios, maybe I can alternate, right? So instead of doing both of those every day, maybe one day is an A day and the next day is a B day. And one day it's more of a classical harmony and the next day it's a contemporary harmony. And I'm still kind of going through the same concept, right? I found that there were different ways to kind of rotate through things and consolidate things. And, you know, I really took a look at everything that I was doing and I was saying, well, this and this kind of do the same thing. So yeah, maybe I should alternate as opposed to hitting them both, you know, every day. Maybe it's just too much time on that. And so after like 2 days, I went from 10 units a day to 5 units a day, and I rocked out 5 units a day for a long time. And to be honest, I felt like I was getting just as much done as I was getting done before in terms of the stuff I was working on and the progress I was making. But I actually was gaining a little bit because my brain was fresher and I was able to stay at a higher level of focus and intention during those 5 units a day. So I feel like those 5 units actually are even qualitatively more productive than the 10 units were before. And so this really turned out to be a breakthrough moment for me. So some suggestions I have for, you know, all of you that are kind of out there paying attention to this. I don't think talent exists. I think advantage exists. And I think some people have more advantages than others in terms of the way that they progress on the instrument. I think, you know, the formula that I talked about before, work hard times work smart, you know, the amount of work you do and the quality of work you do, and that's going to equal your productivity. I think that's true, but I don't think that's the whole story. I think working hard times working smart, plus advantage is going to actually be productivity. And advantages can be musical advantages. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're a second or third or fourth generation musician and your parents were professional musicians or are professional musicians, and ever since you were a fetus, you grew up around people valuing high level sounds, practicing, whether it's orchestras or bands or whatever, if you grow up in that environment, you're going to be surrounded by that environment and you're going to be nurtured in that environment in a way where it is an advantage over people who are not. I'm not saying that that person's definitely going to be better than that person, but it's an advantage. Financial advantages, to pay for private lessons, to be involved in youth orchestra programs, to go to summer music festivals. These things cost money. To play a high level instrument, these things cost money. Not everybody has money. So some people have a financial advantage, right? Physical advantages. Some people just have a physiology where their body works a little bit better, whether it's, slightly bigger lungs, lung capacity. Maybe neurologically, I have an advantage because I seem to sense and find patterns really easily. Obsessing over things and problem solving is not hard for me. So maybe that's like a psychological or a mental and neurological advantage. But there are advantages and disadvantages all over the place. I don't think it's the same as talent. I think the word talent that we use, we're not using it like we shouldn't be using it. But I think it's okay to talk about advantages. And I think disadvantages can be overcome. If you're working harder and working smarter than other people who may have some more advantages, you will surpass them. I think, and you can reach their level of playing. I do think it's possible to help people who maybe have some disadvantages. As a teacher, I'm constantly trying to help students be more creative in the way that they think and approach practicing. I'm constantly trying to inspire people so they get more motivated to practice. And I put resources online. I put all this stuff out for free. It cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars and 16 years of college and another 10 years of just continuing to research and find the cutting edge information in all sorts of scientific research fields. And then I slap it up on a free YouTube video. And I do that because not everybody has the time or the money to spend 16 years in college and read all the books and all the scientific studies and go to the conferences and ask all the questions and take all the lessons with people. So I'm just trying, that's the way that I help. I mean, we're all trying to help each other, right? So work hard times work smart plus advantage. And then all of that, it's a matter of time, how long you've been doing that and how much time you get in on that, right? If you've been doing that for a year, great. If somebody's been doing that for 10 years, they're probably going to be a better player at this point. And that's okay, right? It doesn't even matter. We shouldn't even really be judging ourselves in that kind of a way. Create a passion for practicing. Everybody loves to play. If you have a passion for playing, I don't think that matters as much because there's 10,000 people that have a passion for playing. Playing is easy. You have to have a passion for practicing. You have to have a passion for doing the dirty work, the hard work, the challenging work, to try to creatively come up with solutions for things that you don't know how to solve right now. Your weaknesses. You have to have a passion for that. If you want to get to that top level, if you want to climb Mount Bass Trombone or whatever mountain you're trying to climb, you have to have a passion for practice. I think it is possible to develop a culture of passion for practice or find a culture of passion for practice. If you're a teacher, then you have to develop that culture amongst your students. Like that's what matters, right? Celebrate practicing in your environment. There's a lot of 30-day challenges, 100-day challenges, or if you want to do 1,000-day challenges, whatever, get your students to level up a little bit and get into the passion of practicing. And if you're trying to climb this mountain, find other people who are as passionate as you are. They may be local, they may not be local. You may have long distance friends elsewhere. There are groups online. There are festivals you may do, and you may make friends with somebody or at a gig or whatever, and you find that you both have that passion for practicing. Hang out with those people. Celebrate your relationships with those people. Cultivate your relationships with those people. Talk with those people. There are a couple of people that I send pictures of my practice log every day to, and they send updates to me, and we keep each other motivated, and we inspire each other. I think that's highly necessary no matter what level of practicing you're at. Change your definition to zero. One of the things that I did on my journey was I got to the point where I said, all right, I'm not going to practice today. I'm only going to do my stability and my agility. So I would get 2-3 units a day, right? That'd be my new zero. And if that's all I did, then I didn't really practice on other things. It's still practice, but in my mind, I made it so that the zero meant I'm only going to get those 2 units, or I'm only going to get those 4 units. Have that kind of new zero, and then you'll find you're getting more units, you're getting more consistency, and you're practicing. Things are going to get better faster. You remember your days are numbered. When you keep track, when you write everything down, and when you're paying attention, problems seem to be easier to conquer. Progress just makes more sense. And if you practice every day, then you don't need to dust off the cobwebs, and do the maintenance kind of practicing. you don't have to do maintenance because you're practicing, and you get more time to practice because you're getting less time to do maintenance. Remember, time is finite. Find a good support system. Find that group, family, friends, roommates, online, and a lot of times that's what the environments at various schools of music or, music programs at the university level can provide. It may be an advantage to be in an institution where there are a lot of other people who are as passionate about practicing as you are. That's something that can help. It's not necessary. It's not a prerequisite requirement. I think you can become a great player no matter where you are, no matter who you study with. But some people really find a home, in that university level of study. So worth considering. Even on busy days, I don't care how busy you are, you can get 1 unit of practice. And if you're flying internationally in the time zones or whatever, I don't really care too much about that. There are absolutely days where my practicing was all after midnight. I had a couple of days where I didn't get to playing until midnight, and then I did 4 units and I practiced till about 1:30 or 2 in the morning. I still count that as the day. I don't think I missed a day in that mind because I hadn't gone to bed yet. And in extreme cases, you might be in a situation like that. There were some days where I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning to try to get my units of practice before I started what I knew was going to be a long day. You just need to plan ahead. And if you want it bad enough, you'll plan ahead. And if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to make it happen. So do it. Practicing doesn't have to be exact. The times that you lay down. So here are just a couple examples of some units that are on my practice log. I do some buzzing on my mouthpiece rim. That's what rim means there. B flat slur up to D5. I do some glisses, certain tempos, harmonic fluency, a little chord progression, certain tempos. I do clarity stability. That's where I play certain notes at single, double, triple tonguing. Then some mechanical, that's where I'm just working on moving the slide and doing some, it was triple tonguing that day, but it alternates. The next day to be double tonguing. There's various times listed for these various events. And these are all estimates. It takes me about 1 minute to do the first thing. It takes me about 4 minutes to do the second thing. It takes me about 7 minutes to do the next thing. So they're all about 15 minutes. But again, it's not exact. And it doesn't have to be exact. And if I do this every day, 10 days from now, some things are just going to happen a little more quickly because I'm a little better at it. And 50 days from now, I might find that I actually am consistently finishing with about a minute to go. So I might add a minute's worth of thing in there. And now all of a sudden that's harder to do. So now it takes me 17 minutes to do, for a while. But then after 200 days, that kind of works its way down to 15 minutes. It's this entire ebb and flow, this slight glacial, change that happens, over time. Kind of an evolution of it. We gain in economy, we gain in consolidation, we gain in updating what we're doing. And our needs are going to change as our strengths and weaknesses change. So I've got a website, I've got a YouTube channel. I put a lot of stuff on those things. I take questions. I do the best I can to get back to everybody who has questions. So if you have questions about stuff that I've offered today, feel free to reach out, and happy practicing.